Okay, joining me now live from Perth is the Finance Minister, Matthias Cormann. First up, Matthias, you now, of course, get to continue in government as Finance Minister after waiting just over a week. Congratulations.
Well, obviously, the job that I perform in the next government is a matter for the Prime Minister. Yes, I mean, we're obviously very pleased that the election result has been confirmed and that our team has been successful at this election.
Well, look, we'll never know. As I said at the outset, we'll never know what would have happened if you'd stuck with Tony Abbott 9 months ago and gone to this election. But 9 months ago, if someone had said to you or any of your colleagues in government that you'll go on to fight an election and you'll stay in power with a narrow majority of 1 or 2 seats, you would have jumped at it with both hands, wouldn't you?
Look, we've just gone through an election campaign where we put forward our plan for Australia, our plan for our future. We've been successful, and our focus now is on making sure that Australia is the most successful we can be in the years and in the decades to come, to implement the plans that we took to the election. I mean, obviously, I'll leave it to others to dissect all of the ins and outs of events in the past and what the various permutations may or may not mean. Our focus now is on the job at hand to get back to providing good government for Australia.
You don't want to look back on history. Let me put it another way then. If someone said to you now, at the next election in 3 years' time, you can hold on to power by a margin of 1 or 2 seats, you'd grab that with both hands, wouldn't you? A win is a win.
Well, a win, indeed. I mean, a win is a win is a win. I mean, in a democracy, the way you settle these sorts of contests is, on the basis of who gets a majority of seats in the House of Representatives. So we will have a majority in a majority of seats in the House of Representatives. We've got about 800,000 more Australians who voted for the coalition with their primary vote compared to the Labor Party, and indeed on a two-party preferred basis, more people have supported the coalition than the Labor Party. So by any measure, we have won this election, and we are now able to implement the plan that we took to the election in the next Parliament.
I wouldn't want to start bringing vote counts of two-party preferred or primary into it. I mean, it's all about the seats you win is the safest ground to stay on. I want to come to your program in a moment, but just one question on the message from the electorate. Obviously, you've lost a lot of seats. Obviously, it's a narrow victory. What lessons do you take? What message are you hearing from the electorate as far as the sort of government that you've been delivering and been promising?
Well, obviously, I mean, the judgment that is delivered at an election is a judgment, in relation to the previous 3 years as well as the campaign itself. And, the best way to respond to the message that we have received at this election is to be the best government we possibly can be, making sure that we implement our plan to put the Australian economy on the strongest possible foundation for the future, making sure that we keep Australia safe and secure moving forward. I mean, obviously, people did express a view at this election that we do have to respond to, and as a government we will.
Well, as I said in the opening as well, I don't think Malcolm Turnbull really gave us any speech today exactly what his top priorities are for the first term he's won as Prime Minister. What would you say are the top priorities for government?
Well, we've been very clear all throughout the election campaign that, should we be returned, we will be seeking to legislate our tax cuts for families, our tax cuts for small business. We will, of course, seek to legislate the restoration of the Australian Building and Construction Commission and also deal with the registered organisations legislation in order to ensure...
So, if I can interrupt, are they the fundamentals? Are they the top priorities? That is the business tax plan that was the centrepiece of your economic plan, plus, of course, those double dissolution triggers, the registered organisations bill and the ABCC, the two union accountability bills. Are they the top order of business for the government?
Well, our priority, obviously, is to ensure that the economy is the strongest it possibly can be moving forward, so that people across Australia have the best possible opportunity to be successful and to get ahead. And, obviously our enterprise tax plan, our tax cuts for hardworking families, our commitment to bring back the Australian Building and Construction Commission to ensure that we address lawlessness on construction, on building sites across Australia and bring down the cost of construction. I mean, these are obviously some of the top order issues that we'll deal with as soon as the Parliament gets back, and there's a whole range of other things, obviously, as part of our program that we'll continue to pursue.
Those three items, though, that is the business tax plan and the two items of union accountability that were the double D
and
triggers.
And the tax cuts for families.
All right. Do you say that you have a clear mandate for those and that if the Senate blocks those, it will be rejecting the will of the people?
Well, we clearly have a mandate. I mean, by definition, you go through an election to put forward alternative agendas, alternative teams, and the team that wins a majority of seats in the House of Representatives wins government and wins, obviously, the opportunity to implement, their plan. And that is the coalition in this election. We've put forward our plan. We've won the election. We've won a majority of seats in the House of Representatives when it's all said and done. Of course, we'll be implementing the plan that we took to the election. Now, we are realists. We know that, in the Senate, we will not have a majority in our own right. That means that in the Senate, we'll have to work with others in order to ensure that we get our agenda through the Parliament, and that will happen in the ordinary course of events.
What's the chances the next election could also be a double dissolution sometime on those same measures, the ABCC and the Registered Organisations Bill?
I think, Chris, you're getting way ahead of yourself now. I mean, we've just gone through an election.
But there's not much chance of them getting through. There's not much chance of them being passed, is there?
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that at all. I mean, I was listening very carefully to an interview that Pauline Hanson gave, I think, on Sky News, and she was her comments were very encouraging when it comes to our proposal to bring back the Australian Building and Construction Commission. So I mean, people will make all sorts of assumptions. There'll be all sorts of commentary. From our point of view, we took an agenda to the election. We put a plan to the Australian people at the election. We've won the election, and we will now set out to implement our plan, and that includes putting forward a proposal to the House of Representatives initially to bring back the Australian Building and Construction Commission, and that'll go through through the usual process. And if the Senate again rejects that legislation to bring back the Australian Building and Construction Commission, it would go to a joint sitting. Now, there are obviously a whole series of steps between now and then, but I would not make any assumptions whatsoever. We certainly will do everything we can to see that legislation get through the Parliament successfully.
Look, what about the big issue, and that is budget repair, fiscal repair? We had Standard & Poor's come out this week, obviously offering their judgment, putting our AAA credit rating on a negative watch. They obviously think your job has become harder to deliver budget repair. How are you going to get spending cuts through the Senate? Is that suddenly harder than it was even before the election?
Well, obviously we've got to keep to a fiscal discipline, and that is, we can't spend money we haven't got. We've got to make sure that we live within our means, and we've got to continue to implement a plan that brings us back to a balance in the projected timetable.
But the Labor Party and the Greens, who are going to have the numbers in the Senate, are quite prepared to spend money we haven't got. So they're going to thwart you at every turn to try and cut back on spending.
Well, the first point is that we forced Labor during this election campaign to backflip and roll over in relation to a whole series of savings that they've steadfastly opposed in the past Parliament. So we would now expect the Labor Party to stick to what they said to the Australian people in the course of this election campaign, and to support all of the savings that the government has put forward in the last Parliament, unsuccessfully, but which Labor during this campaign now said that they would support. Yep. We expect that Bill Shorten will deliver on his commitments there. So that means that we will make some further progress if he's a man of his word.
He did. Bill Shorten did say today that he wanted to be constructive, so there is room to move on some of those issues. Perhaps.
And that was my second point. That was my second point. And we take him by his word when he says that he wants to take a constructive attitude and approach into this Parliament. So we will engage with him.
Does that mean there'll be some give and take on your behalf? For instance, might you agree, as Labor proposals, to keep the debt levy in place in order to get Labor agreement on some other spending cuts?
Our plan is reflected in our budget. Obviously that was a temporary budget repair levy, something that Labor incidentally initially opposed. I'm not going to obviously now make future decisions on the run. We as a cabinet, under the leadership of Malcolm Turnbull, will of course make judgments on the best way forward down the track depending on what sort of challenges and opportunities are in front of us. That is what we always would do in these sort of circumstances.
Two more questions briefly. On superannuation, Labor effectively abandoned its policy during the campaign, said they'd look at it afterwards. Your policy has been blamed as one of the big reasons you put your base offside. Will you revisit superannuation policy in light of the election result and in light of wanting to try and do a deal with Labor?
Well, we don't believe that that our efforts to make our superannuation system fairer and more sustainable were the reason for the election result. Indeed, I mean, if you look at what actually happened on a seat-by-seat basis, seats like Curtin, which would be, I guess, more concerned to the extent that there is concern. There was actually a swing towards the Liberal Party, and similarly in other seats. Where perhaps people would be more affected by some of the changes we've put forward.
Sure, but you can do a deal with Labor on this. This is an issue you can do a deal with Labor on, isn't it? Superannuation.
And the other is true also. Those seats that were less affected by super, we actually had the stronger swings against us. Now, look, I mean, we've put forward a plan which is reflected in our budget. Our intention is to implement the plan that we took to the election. I mean, if you take a budget to an election and you win the election, obviously your starting position is that you will, give it your best to implement the plan that the people have endorsed. But depending on what happens in the Parliament, depending on what happens with the conversations moving forward, we'll make relevant judgments as required.
Well, I reckon given Labor led the way on that policy issue, if you're looking to make some changes, there might be a prospective area for you to negotiate with Labor. But you can just take that as a comment, if you like, Matthias Cormann. I just want to finish off with a question, and that is whether or not you would like to see your former leader, Tony Abbott, back in Cabinet.
Look, I mean, that is obviously entirely a matter for the Prime Minister. I mean, the makeup of the Cabinet is a matter for the Prime Minister. I just note that Tony Abbott himself has said that he's not seeking to get back into the Cabinet. He's played a very positive and very constructive role during this campaign. He is setting out what he seeks to do in the next Parliament as the member for Warringah, and no doubt as a highly regarded and highly respected former, elder statesman of the party. And obviously he's been very clear in terms of his intentions. But I mean, the makeup of the Cabinet is entirely a matter for the Prime Minister.
Matthias Cormann, thanks very much for joining us again on Viewpoint.
Always good to talk to you.